G'day everyone. You know, one of the best parts about being a watch enthusiast is that when it becomes common knowledge with others, you sometimes get lucky and get gifted watches on special occasions. And this explains how I came into possession of this Invicta Angel, which looks pretty but is no doubt a lady's watch. And without a lady nearby to help me model this, looks like I'll have to improvise and shake it up a bit, and that feels cooler. And now with less weight on my wrist, let's start reviewing the Invicta Angel. So here's a specs list of all the details, including physical dimensions, weight with bracelet, water resistance, crystal, movement, and price. Now, as this watch was gifted to me, I didn't buy this myself, but the price below was the best I could find for it at the time. And I am aware that this is a lady's watch, so I'm not its intended market. So the first noticeable element on this watch is gold, gold, gold. If you saw my early review of a mass JCB, you'll remember I said it takes the gold theme and ramps it up to 11. Well, the Angel seems to have pushed that barrier, and just about every facet on this watch is gold, and I'll get into that later. When you look at the dial, the first thing that jumps at you is the 12 o'clock Roman indice, followed very closely by the one at 6 o'clock. Both have a very large presence on the dial, which is also thanks to the smaller crystals that resemble diamonds embedded into them. They certainly look pretty, and they're anything but subtle. The remaining Roman indices running around the dial aren't quite as bold or intense, instead keeping more to the gold theme of the Angel. Just underneath the 12 o'clock indice you have the Invicta text in gold. I'm not certain if this text has been applied or not, but it manages to sit a bit higher up the dial, giving it a slightly commanding presence and a quality appearance. Followed underneath in smaller, darker printed text is the water-resistant caption and rating just below that. Perched above the 6 o'clock marker is a slightly larger Angel text printed with what I assume is a tiny halo placed atop the capital A. Replacing the 3 o'clock numeral is a simple date complication with a Cyclops magnifier. The presence of a Cyclops on a date complication can be divisive, but its use here was executed rather well. It aligns well with the date display and its magnification isn't too large, so the overall appearance is still large enough to view clearly, but doesn't have a bulbous view that some magnification windows have. Moving towards the center of the dial, you have a lume-filled Mercedes hands, with a second hand ticking along with a lume-filled lollipop pointer and the winged Invicta logo on the other end acting as counterweight, which I feel adds a more interesting visual element to what is otherwise an ordinary handset. To help accentuate those hands and indices, the golden dial itself has a lighter, almost champagne color tone. This helps to add more visual appeal, as its slight sunburst plays nicely with the light and it provides another, albeit limited, color change, helping to break up what could otherwise be a monotonous gold. And if you look closer at the dial and beyond the 12 and 6 indices, you can appreciate those gold contrasts more when comparing it with the other markers and the Invicta font. Moving further out, and you have a golden 120 click bezel with decent yet tinny ratcheting and minimal backplay, and a gold-plated steel case with polished surfaces everywhere, save for a brush finish on the top of the lugs. One visual element I like about the bezel is how the numbers and markers are polished, yet the rest of it is all brushed. And for a change, it's nice to grip a bezel with softer edges after testing out many of the rougher offerings from AliExpress. One of the very few places you'll see gold is on the stainless steel case back itself, which sports the laser-etched Invicta Angel text, along with its specifications around the circumference. Lacking the gold colour is also the back of the bracelet clasp, and the bracelet itself wears surprisingly comfortably on the wrist, and even with Magilla Gorilla arms, I didn't get any hairs nipped. The inclusion of a stamped Invicta logo on the clasp front adds a nice quality touch, and 4 micro adjustments is a welcome bonus for getting the right sizing. More on that later. But with an 18mm lug width, finding a different strap or bracelet in its size won't be a hard task. And helping to protect the watch from any liquid damage is an advertised 100 meters of water resistance. For a watch of this design and caliber, that's pretty impressive. But I'll mention that later as well. Because now I descend into my mixed feelings about the Angel, and front and center are those crystal-filled indices. They look dazzling and vibrant, but they're also loud and in your face, and I feel this is one of the main elements that will be a make or break for interested buyers. The other, of course, being that sea of gold that adorns nearly every facet, from the dial to the case, the crown, and even the bezel. The crown is signed with the Invicta logo and keeps to the gold theme, but one quirk is that there's very little travel between the first and second adjustment when pulling the crown, so if you want to set the date you have to use a very soft and gentle action to get it right. The use of a quartz movement might also turn some people away, but at around $140 this shouldn't come as a shock, and it is a Seiko, so at least it's not a no-name movement. And now we descend into the negatives of the Angel. The first and biggest one I have to say is, what is this watch and who is it meant for? I mean, for the most part it looks like a fashion watch because of its all gold colour scheme and those blinged out 6 and 12 indices, but then you've also got a diver's bezel, Mercedes hands that belong more on a Submariner or one of its hundreds of homages, and an oyster bracelet that looks very swag yet a bit tool-like and masculine. I seriously reckon if a diver and fashion watch had a wild, hazy yet unforgettable weekend together and produced a child from it, this would be the end result. Yet I really don't think this mix works well at all. If the Angel was meant to be a fashion watch, they should just ditch the rotating bezel for a fixed plain one, and if a bracelet was still a requirement, go for a golden mesh one. And if it was meant to be a diver, well, prepare for disappointment. The bezel may look nice and operate decently with minimal backplay, but there's no loom at all to speak of, not even a pip at the 12 o'clock, so you won't be timing anything underwater. The 100 meters of water resistance would also restrict any diving prospects for the Angel, and while this in theory would be good to go for snorkeling at least, remember that the crown uses a push-pull function and not screw-down, and the way it just spins so freely after setting it makes me a bit nervous. Balloon-filled hands start off with a bright and healthy glow, but unfortunately it is fairly short-lived. After around 5 minutes they lose a lot of that shine, and at around the 20-minute mark they are still legible, but just barely. The absence of any loom on the indices doesn't do its nighttime legibility any favours either. As for my other P's, lug-to-lug measurement I feel is a bit too long for a watch this size, as it gives the Angel a large presence on the wrist. Given this is a ladies' watch, I feel it could have come back to at least 46mm to make it wear more compact. And I know this feature is common on most Invicta watches, but I really don't like its name printed on the side of the case. It's a bit tacky in my opinion. And of course, a mineral crystal that's more prone to scratching versus sapphire isn't helping its case. And with the notable absence of the chapter ring, setting the time precisely can be a bit of a hit or miss affair. But my final grumble goes back to that bracelet. As you can see on my wrist shots, it wears a little loose, and normally I would use a pin remover tool to take out one or two of the links, but it didn't matter which pin I chose, the buggers just won't budge. Even using a pin punch and repair hammer didn't move them. And yes, before you ask, I did check the arrow directions too. If you own a screw pin removal tool, it might not be an issue, but if other Angel bracelets are like my example, you're stuck with the links. And as a final blow, the end links are hollow, the quality feels rather chintzy and rattly, and the pressed metal clasp has no release button, so getting it on and off is a clumsy affair. But as I mentioned near the beginning, this is a ladies' watch, and so this might appeal to a different clientele. And as a result, there are things I may have overlooked or don't fully appreciate. But would I recommend this watch to others? No. For me, it's that weird hybrid fashion diver's design and the overall lack of features that make me averse to this watch. I still think that if they just kept it fashionable and ditched the diver bezel and put it on a nice mesh bracelet, it might be worth considering, assuming of course you love loud indices and gold is life. If you've owned a similar Invicta watch before, I'd be interested to hear thoughts about it. But that's it for now, and thanks for watching, eh?